just offer up a couple of comments. Excuse me?
Hey!
Oh! I got a microphone. I'm finding it hard to talk over the sound. So anyway, thank you again for coming. Again, Jerry Stomsky, the first selectman. Is the second term elected official. I've vowed this year to try to reach out to the Democrats and build bridges. I think it's important for us to communicate with one another and try to work in a bipartisan fashion. I do have a little bit of trouble though sometimes trying to get my hands around exactly what the initiatives are that the other party is trying to do. And I'm always trying to look for some common denominator that kind of brings this together. And the other night I was watching the congressional hearings and saw Nancy Pelosi and a graduate student from Georgetown University, and they were talking about contraceptives, and the girl indicated that she was having trouble maintaining her classes because she was spending all of her money that she raised in the summertime in the tune of $3,000 for contraceptives. And I got thinking, I said, wow, you know, condoms are $1 a piece, it kind of averages out to $10 a day, 10 times a day. So I got thinking, I said maybe she needs to spend a little bit more time studying, and it certainly would help.
She's drumming up business for her future practice.
Possibly. So in light of that, I said, well, you know, let me kind of look and see if I can find this common denominator. And the Congressional 5th District Democrats just met the other day. And so I've received some press from patch.com. And I'd like to kind of go over it with you, so if you can just bear with me for a couple minutes, I'd kind of like to give you my perspective on some of the things that I finally found that there's a connection with the Democrats, so if you can just bear with me for a minute. What I'm going to call this is the Democratic Roadmap to Recovery. So let's look at some of the things that the Democrats are talking about. Obviously, the sex thing works, so let's kind of add this up. And so we got the sex. So the next thing they're talking about in here is education. I can tell you that as a country, we get a big F in education. We are a failing society of education. I can tell you right here in our own region, we have decreasing number of students, and we have spiraling costs for education. So our education gets a big F, but we're going to put it up here. So far we have sex education. Sex education, so maybe we got something going here. So now we look in here a little farther, and we look out and we see that all of these people, they sided with President Obama on the rejection of the Keystone Pipeline. So we have no oil, we have no heat. So we have no heat. So now we have no heat, but we have sex education. So maybe with a little bit of this, maybe you can create your own heat. So now as we start looking down here a little bit farther, we have create employment opportunities. Okay, no heat, sex education, opportunities. Employment. Not sure if there's a common denominator here. No heat, sex education, and employment opportunities. Maybe we keep going down here. Now we're starting to look at, let's tax the millionaires. That's a way to get us out of here. Let's tax the millionaires. So let's see. We'll tax the millionaires. Tax the millionaires. So we tax the millionaires. We have no heat, but we have sex education and opportunities. There's something going on here. So next what we look at here is, how about legalized marijuana? That's another one. Must sit around, have sex, legalize marijuana. So we got pot. So there's some common denominators here. We're going to tax the millionaires. We're not going to have any heat. We certainly have a failed energy where I guess we're going to raise the price of gas so that everybody goes to alternative energies. So we have no heat. We tax the millionaires, we have no heat. We have sex education opportunities, and we're going to legalize pot. Anybody see something going wrong here? So one of the other things, they're going to invest into bioscience. Bioscience. This is probably because the sex education opportunities with Bill Heath, maybe what they're going to do is try to find a cure for sexually transmitted diseases or something. I guess where I'm going with this, we've got to do better. And I'm going to tell you, my forefathers, grandparents, and their grandparents, they died for this country. And when I see our President of the United States apologizing for a Koran burning that was being used for other purposes other than praying, I'm equally as offended when my flag is being burned. So we have a great amount of people and a great amount of talent here that have come here today that are going to make this country right. And I'm going to ask every one of you to listen to what they say and support their efforts, because we honestly, we have to do better than what we're doing. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to one of our candidates. Well, thank you very much. We have in first Ed DeCourton.
Where are you here?
I'm right here. First, I'd like to also thank the Minortown Firearms Enthusiast. We call them the Northern Militia. I'd like to thank them for sponsoring this, for coming here today. So Ed, if you want to come up and possibly introduce the candidates. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce the Senate candidates first. I saw Chris Shays here. Chris, if you'd like to come up for 5 minutes and talk, and then when you're done, we'll bring the next ones up. Again, everybody, Chris Shays, runner for the U.S. Senate. Thank you very much.
I one time spoke too long and my daughter bawled me out, so she makes me use the stopwatch. Let me thank you all for being here, and thank Jerry for what surprisingly is not just outrageous, but it happens to be true. That's what makes it outrageous. While Rome is burning, our Democratic colleagues are eating grapes. Let me first tell you a little about myself, and then I want to get to the issue of the Second Amendment. I was raised, had 3 older brothers, and my 3 older brothers were off to college or out by the time I was in 6th grade, and my dad would come home from work. I lived in Darien, Connecticut, and we used to have dinner in those days, and my dad would talk about the stuff he read in the 3 papers in the morning and the 2 in the afternoon. He would sometimes bring in an Ann Landers question and ask me what would my answer be to the question they asked Ann Landers. I was never allowed to say something was stupid. I always had to have a reason. My dad would sometimes take the other side. I developed an absolute fascination and love of American history. And my parents began to realize that this young son that they had a particular love for this country and wanted to somehow be connected with it, either working in government or serving maybe someday as an elected official. And my dad always told me that public service was one of the highest forms of service. And that was my love. I went into the Peace Corps. I worked as a mayor's aide. I ended up getting an MBA. Everybody thought, well, if you're going into politics, you got to be a lawyer. And I said, we have too many lawyers. And I got an MBA and an MPA, Master's in Public Administration. I ran and was elected 7 times to the State House of Representatives. I was one of only 33 Republicans who won in the Watergate era in 1974. There were a lot of Democrats then. But I learned something. If you work hard, if you make sure that you're not being partisan, but sticking to Republican principles being at the very core a faith in democracy and a love for the free market, and recognize you can't have a free market without democracy, and that the real job growth happens in the private sector. And then I had the opportunity to run in 1987 against 2 millionaires. I was told I wouldn't even be a factor in the race. That's what the Times said and the Washington Post, and I won the primary, and I was 30 points behind the general election and won that. I won 18 elections as a Republican. Never ever served, sought to have another platform to run with, another party that would help maybe get me over the top. I was the last Republican congressman in all of New England. I survived the 2006 election, in spite of the fact that even one of my opponents gave $9,800 to Rahm Emanuel and Nancy Pelosi to get her elected, and then gave her $11,000 in 08 to keep her as speaker. I lost in 08. And let me just tell you what I feel. I want my country back. I want this dynamic, incredibly opportunity-filled country back. I also want my party back. I want my party back from the belief that 2 millionaires from Greenwich are our salvation. It's not about money. It's about experience. It's about service. It's about what you have done with your life for your country. Now, I stand before you as someone who voted for the assault weapons ban. And that didn't make me very popular with NRA, and they said, it's not going to do any good, and I said it would, and it didn't do any good. And I told them I wouldn't vote to renew it when it ran out. I have a property in St. Michael's, Maryland, and on it I have a blind. I didn't put it up, I bought it, and my neighbors use it every year to hunt basically the geese. And I've gotten to have a real affection for understanding the heartfelt feeling that people who know the Second Amendment a little better than I used to know it have for how important it is. I'd go off to work on a Monday into Washington, and I'd see 30 guys waiting to go out and hunt or fish, crab, clam, just the incredible spirit of what exists out there. So I did vote for the assault weapon ban, but I also voted to allow pilots to have weapons. I also voted to allow individuals who are in law enforcement and retired to carry their weapons anywhere. My agenda is to get our country back on track. It's not an agenda to try to restrict the rights of the Second Amendment. We need to get our country's financial house in order. We need to get it, and that means balancing the budget not in 18 years or 23 years, but within that 6-year term that you have. I'm out there to make sure we're energy independent, totally and completely, so we don't spend $1 billion every day overseas. And I'm out running for Congress to make sure we transform Washington. Let me end with this, that we transform Washington so that we simplify our tax code, get rid of all the write-offs that exist in them, and that we get rid of the red tape. Red tape is a term that comes from the Civil War. They used to wrap all the rules and regulations during the Civil War in red tape. I've got some of that on the wall, that very red tape from the Civil War. We got to get rid of it. We have some rules and regulations that go back to the 1800s. So my time is up. I did speak 6 minutes, so I welcome my fellow colleague who's going to be speaking to do the same thing. Are we to take questions, or are we just...
I think we're going to let him speak, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you for Shays. Next, our Senate candidate is Peter Lamage. Peter, if you'd like to come up and...
Thank you, sir.
Will you give him 6 minutes? Because I took an extra minute.
I'll give him 6 minutes.
Don't give him 7, though.
Thank you for having me, sir. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Peter Lamage. I come from Fairfield, Connecticut, where I live with my wife and 3 kids. Ladies and gentlemen, 23 years ago, I would not have been allowed to speak to Americans, would not have been allowed to sit down and talk to anyone who came from the West, actually. I was not allowed to think freely. I was not allowed, of course, to carry weapons, because I lived in a communist country, namely Albania, where the government controlled everything, where the government disarmed us, and there was a reason for that. And we see the same approach over here recently. here in the United States, even though it was illegal to leave Albania. Anyone who thought of leaving would have faced either imprisonment or execution. Nevertheless, my 3 brothers and I chose to take that risk, and we left. Once we left Albania, my entire family was picked up by the regime, taken into a concentration camp, where my father passed away. That was to punish them, my family, because they didn't turn us in, because we were searching for freedom and opportunity. In 23 years over here, I've been able to go to college, eventually went to law school, became an attorney. Today I have my own practice. I employ people today. I'm living the American dream. Only, if nothing else, just being in the United States, being a free man, knowing what it means to live as God has meant us to live, free, that is the dream come true for me. However, I see concerns about this country, and concerns that concern me too. I've seen this nation move to the left. All we hear nowadays is that we have high unemployment, high inflation, confiscatory taxation, retreat from obligations that we have abroad, apologizing for being Americans. That must stop. We are a force for good in the world. We have no reasons to apologize to anyone for being Americans. Arnold Toynbee years ago said that great civilizations are not murder. They commit suicide. Are we committing suicide, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes.
I'm afraid we are, unless we take a position against the liberal views and liberal agendas who are destroying this country. We have to stand up to them. We have, within the Republican Party, sometimes, unfortunately, even in the leadership, who have contempt for conservatives, contempt for conservatism, and contempt for conservative candidates. Well, I happen to be absolutely conservative, and I make no apologies for it. I support the Second Amendment because I've seen what the government does when they disarm the people. They disarmed us back in Albania, and we couldn't resist the government after that. They became abusive, intrusive, and could do anything they wanted to do with us. That's a natural right that we have to defend ourselves. And no one should be able to take it away from us. Well, my name is Peter Lumaj. I appreciate your time, and I'm running for the United States Senate as a Republican conservative.
Thank you very much, Peter. Next, Kai Westby. Kai, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed, for setting this meeting up, and Jerry, Woodbury RTC, and all the sportsmen of Northwest Connecticut. My name is Kai Westby. I want to be your United States Senator because I am the right person for the job. You know, as I go around the state meeting with all kinds of groups, people talk about all their problems, deficits and debt, the way government is out of control. The one overriding issue I see is the fundamental lack of integrity in our elected officials in Washington. The fast and furious scheme, which I have talked about in YouTube videos, and where I have come out for Eric Holder to be removed because he is an embarrassment to the Second Amendment. The Solyndra scandal, where people are given money from the government who just happen to donate to the president's campaign. Obamacare, with its multiplicity of kickbacks and side deals to pass legislation that is going to be harmful for our American future. And, last but not least, congressional insider trading, where congressmen make millions of dollars buying and selling stocks based on inside information And if we did the same thing right now, we would be in federal prison. This has got to stop. And there's one more thing. Chris Murphy. Chris Murphy says he's in favor of the middle class. Well, guess what? When he was in the state senate, he passed bills. He played a pivotal role in passing gas taxes for our Connecticut consumers that made Connecticut the highest gas tax in the country. When he was elected to Congress, he promised us that he would support a move toward energy independence, and he has blocked and stopped domestic drilling. Last but not least, he has not come out in favor of the Keystone Pipeline. He is squarely behind Barack Obama in rejecting the Keystone Pipeline. Now I have to say this. In Connecticut, our industry is hurting. But there is one industry that's really working well, and that's Chris Murphy's bologna factory. Chris Murphy's bologna factory is very unusual. First of all, it works 7 days a week. His bologna factory works in double shifts. And the thing is, if you swallow his bologna, it's going to start coming out of your ears. And last but not least, Chris Murphy's bologna is hazardous to your health. Send me to Washington. I'm the right guy for the job, and I will get rid of the Chris Murphy bologna factory and all of the other left-wing politicians who are trying to take this country down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kai. We're looking for Brian Hill. Brian, get here yet? If not, I guess we'll move on to the congressional.
Excuse me. Would it be possible to ask questions
Yeah.
to people by the groups for the
Sure.
audience?
You want to bring up the Senate candidates and we'll come up here and ask some questions? Sure. Give you 10 minutes worth of questions, okay? Leslie, I guess we'll start with you since you...
Okay, my first question.
Leslie, you want the microphone?
No, I'll shout.
Okay.
Maybe I'd like to start with Chris Shays, but to everybody. You said very clearly that you want to reduce deficit spending in Washington and balance the budget. My expectation is that, like everybody else, if you are supporting a measure to do that, you'll be asked to find offsets for spending. And the things that will be picked will be things that will be hurting the poor, or hurting this, or hurting that. How will you respond to the automatic vilification of people who try to stop the spending? So I thought of starting with Chris because he's had Washington experience, but I'd like to hear from everybody.
Yeah, we'll just keep rotating.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Until we get our country's financial house in order, until we do that, nothing else matters. We're basically going bankrupt, and I believe you tell the American people the truth, and then they will empower you to do the right thing. Not oppose, but empower you. I had a great glimpse of that when we had a three-man race for the presidency of the United States, Jimmy Carter, and former senior President Bush, and, not Jimmy Carter, I'm sorry, Bill Clinton, and Ross Perot. And Ross Perot came out with charts that showed that revenue was like this, spending was like this. And when we got elected in 1995, we promised that we would get our financial house in order. And what we did is we froze government spending, and we slowed the growth of entitlements, and we cut taxes, and we balanced the budget for 4 years. And What happened was the speaker came to me. I was a number 2-person, 3-person on the budget committee. He came to John Casey, who was the chairman, and a few of the others, and said, we got to make sure the appropriators don't spend too much, and the Ways and Means don't tax too much and entitle too much, and Commerce. And we got a group of us to take on our appropriators. We lost that when Newt was no longer there, and the Grant-Rudman rules that enable us to enforce the budget were taken out. To answer your question about taking the heat, honestly, we have to totally reform entitlements. We have to. We have no choice. You need to reform entitlements so they're there, and when I talk about Medicare and Medicaid, so they're there for future generations. So my conversation is going to be, if you want it for your kids and your kids' kids, we have to reform it. We have to change it. We have to not be as generous in some instances. And we have to downsize government. Now that will be a pleasure. I was out of office for a period of time, and I co-chaired the Commission on Wartime Contracting. I was officed in Roslyn, right across the river, and I noticed that everybody came out of the buildings worked for the government. And all those private buildings you see all around Washington, Alexandria and Roslyn, and so on in Arlington, they're government folk. Bless them. But it takes 11 people in government to make a decision. It takes 3 people in the private sector. We have too many government employees. And so I have no problem going to anyone and saying, how does the Department of Education help your school system in Woodbury? How does the state? And you know, you're going to be hard-pressed to get a good answer. They can be much smaller, so could the Department of Energy. So we're going to downsize government with pleasure. My model is a governor who happens to be from New Jersey. It's straight talk, he's not arrogant, and I'll sink or swim in that direction.
Okay, the way I see it, the way I see this is this. If you send me to Washington, my job would be to make Washington as irrelevant as possible in your life. Now, Washington doesn't have any problems with revenues. They have problems with spending. Chris has been there, he's seen that. If I start using terminology that is used in Washington, D.C., most of us will be lost. What is this guy talking about? The truth is this, cut spending. How do you do that? Federal agencies, 10 to 15%. Reduce them. Reduce them, 10 to 15%. If we're making adjustments in our lives, we're not taking the long vacations we used to take. We're not buying the expensive cars. We're adjusting our lives according to the financial situation that we're facing. Let the Washington, D.C. do the same thing. Adjust to it. Eliminate certain agencies completely. Start with IRS. Start with IRS. Department of Education, what is it doing? Energy Department. We have so many departments that we don't even know what they do except spending billions of dollars from our tax money. So we have to reduce the government. Now, the other thing, entitlement. We have to stop being politically correct. If we don't do that, we're not going to be able to reform it. We have people that, I think it's about 43% of the US population right now, that is receiving some sort of government assistance. The liberals, the left, that's what they want. Create dependency on the government. Because once you depend on the government, you become a voting bloc for them. We have to face that. Tell them, face this group of people, and explain to them that conservatism works. We as conservatives and Republicans sometimes are ashamed to proclaim our conservative values. Reagan did it, and it worked very well. If we do it again, just explain it properly, and embrace it fearlessly, it's a theory that works. We just have to go out there and educate the public that liberalism enslaves you. Conservatism liberates you. We have to liberate the individual and limit the government as much as possible. That would be my job if I go to Washington, D.C., as I said before. Make Washington as irrelevant as possible in our lives. Thank you.
Well spoken, Peter. The way to reduce spending is across the board spending cuts, to bring government spending back to its 2008 levels. Over the last 4 years, government spending has been a rocket ship out of control. We need to reform entitlements and cut spending across the board in our government, with special emphasis on the Department of Education and the Department of Energy. I believe the Department of Defense has to retain its strength, but the Department of Energy and the Department of Education can be substantially cut because they're, in my opinion, beyond the proper scope of the Constitution. If we stay within the proper bounds of the Constitution, we will have balanced budgets and we will have ourselves a federal government that's in control. The problem is unconstitutional expansion of federal powers. That is the essence of our deficit problems. Thank you.
Any other questions? Sean?
I have a question for all of you. Back in one of the many debates we've had for the Republican nomination for president, Ron Paul pointed out to Newt Gingrich that the budget was never really balanced in the 90s, and Newt Gingrich gave a look which said to me that he admitted it was correct. The deficit, the actual debt we had increased even under those times in the 90s. And one of the biggest concerns that conservatives had, and actually Congressman Shays, I was a constituent of yours and we talked about this in your office in 2006, that the Republicans who have been to Washington have not acted in the way that they said they were. And this has been a history of this. We saw this in 2010 when the Republicans promised to get our fiscal house in order, and we spent months talking about, what, a few $1 billion on a $1.5 trillion deficit. So my question is to each of you, what are you going to do to stop this problem, which is, we know what the Democrats are about, $1.5 trillion deficits. What are you going to do to make sure the Republicans follow through on their commitments and legitimately fix the problem? No more borrowing, no more games, a true fix of the problem. And if you'd like to, if you feel it's appropriate, go into what you would do in your particular plan. Thank you.
I'm going to start there. Okay. The problem with the Republican Party is not new to any one of us. What happens is that once we elect someone and goes to Washington, D.C., the first thing they do, even though they are Republicans, they start negotiating, compromising, and almost selling us down the drain as Republicans. They are not conservatives. They are not conservatives. That is the problem. In order for us to fix the problem within the Republican Party, we're going to have to vet the candidates properly. Let's duke it out between Chris and Kai and me and whoever else comes over here. Make sure that you question us. Assess us properly. Just because someone has been in Congress for many, many years, it doesn't mean that we need someone with that kind of experience to go back there to fix the problems that were there even when he was there. Could have been fixed. Some of these problems. What we need is conservatives who are not looking for a job. They are looking for service. Any one of us, whoever wins this, and we have to have a Republican go to Washington, D.C. as a United States Senator this year. No question about it. Any one of us would be better than Chris Murray or any other Democrats. Any one of us. But whoever goes to Washington, and I hope he's going to be a Republican, I think in 6 years we should challenge from within the party whoever is going to be there and make sure that we keep them to the right. If the incumbents are not challenged from within the party, they become so comfortable that they become liberals. They become Democrats. It's a job. They got a position over there. No one challenges them. They don't care about us any longer. We have to challenge them. That is the only way to keep them on the right. That's where we belong. On the right. We're Republicans. We have lost that sense of republicanism, if you will. That's, we're supposed to bring to Washington, D.C. As I said before, we're sometimes we're just shy or ashamed of claiming our conservative values. We must do that. It's nothing wrong with that. It works. We know it works. So if I go over there, trust me, I wouldn't have any problems to stand up to my own party. And to a certain extent, I'm doing it right now, actually. I don't think it's going to sound pretty good, but I'm doing it right now. You know, and I have no problem. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Sean, great question. The financial deficit in Washington has a root cause, and that's an integrity deficit. People go to Washington, and once they get in the Beltway, they develop this kind of Beltway-itis. And instead of following the Constitution as the supreme law of the land, they take it upon themselves to think that they can do a good job and get reelected by playing Santa Claus. Collectively, we have 535 people in Washington who think it's their job to be Santa Claus and bring goodies home to their constituents rather than financially balance the budget and control spending. What we have is an integrity deficit in Washington. And this is what I would propose. We have a Senate. We have a United States Senate that has not passed a budget in over 1,000 days, almost 3 years. What I would say is this: if you, as a United States Senator, can't pass a budget, you cannot draw a salary. The people in the United States Senate have deliberately let us down by refusing to pass a budget. The only way you can enforce that is to put laws in place that say you cannot draw a salary until you do your job properly. That's my solution.
You know, I'm hearing a comment about when you go to Washington, you're not true to yourself. So I'm going to address that first. First, I was always willing to go to Washington to lose an election to do the right thing. I don't think anyone ever in their life didn't say I wasn't a man of my word. Everything I said in a campaign, I sought to do. And nobody would ever suggest otherwise. So we can say generically when people go to Washington, they don't live up to it. I happened to vote for a war going to Iraq that I knew would probably cause my defeat. I didn't say, oh, I'm against the war because it might cause my defeat. I never thought that way. When I was in the State House and a corrupt attorney and judge were taking over a $40 million estate, declaring her incompetent, and then letting the lawyers rewrite her will so that they were the beneficiaries, and when they were caught, they were just, the probate judge was just taken off and the attorneys were just allowed to continue to practice law. I took an impeachment against the judge. It wasn't popular because he was a powerful Democrat from Hartford. And then what I did is I took a grievance against the attorneys. It took me 3 years to have it heard. And when I went to the grievance board, there were 8 attorneys and me, and I'm not an attorney. And I finally got it to go to the court. When it got to the court, the judge who heard the case happened to have been the campaign manager of the corrupt probate judge. And when I attempted to address the court as I was promised, I was sent to jail. I thought I'd be impeached. You know, a legislator being sent to jail for contempt of court. I didn't give a goddamn, excuse me. I didn't give a damn. Because these guys were so corrupt. But I thought it would mean I'd lose the next election. In fact, the Speaker of the House took me off as the chairman of the Judiciary Subcommittee when I was sent to jail. And the public forced him to put me back on. And the public, after that, made sure that these attorneys were brought to justice and they were found guilty. So I just want to put that aside. There's no point in getting elected if you're not going to do what you need to do to help your country. You're right. You're right about this. That when you add all the revenues that come into the state, you have what you call Social Security. And that is counted as part of the revenue that came in. So when you take the revenue out, you still had a bit of a deficit. But what we did was so huge and so significant in the course of where the trend was. And maybe you want someone who is just going to say no, 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 and be put on the side, or you're going to try to get us in the right direction. And so, you know, maybe the Constitution was a failure too. That was called the Grand Compromise. If people went and our founding fathers had decided to just say, I'm this and I'm this, we wouldn't have had a constitution. We'd have 13 colonies. So when you're sent to Washington, you also have to know how to do something to get it done. And I will tell you, my experience tells me I can get it done. And one last point. I made it very clear what I'd do if I was there today. It's been 1,040 days since they passed a budget. A budget tells you how much you can spend, how much you can entitle, how much you can tax. That's what a budget does down in Washington. And the Senate hasn't passed it. If I was the House, I would refuse to negotiate with the Senate until they had a budget, because the House Republicans passed their budget. But what I would do is every day I would go to the Senate floor and I'd say, Mr. Reed, sir, you haven't yet passed a budget. It's been 1,040 days. When are you going to pass the budget? And he'd give me some story. I'd go there the next day and I'd say the same thing. I'd go there the next day and the same thing. Then some of my Republicans would come over to me and say, Chris, I don't think you should be doing that. You're not making friends. And I'd say, I don't care. Our country's going bankrupt. That's how I would approach my job. And then you know what would happen? The press would start talking about this idiot on the floor who's making an issue of the days. And then they'd start asking Reed when he's going to do his job. There are ways to get things done. I've been able to do them. Sometimes I'm a Washington insider, sometimes I'm an outsider. On ethics, I wanted ethics reform, I was an outsider. Campaign finance reform, I was an outsider because I wanted campaign finance reform. Lobby disclosure and all those things, those were my bills that passed. I didn't make friends doing that, but I told the public, and this is the last point, I use what I call my community meeting test. It's very simple. I get elected, I have a community meeting, and then I've got to respond to people. And they're going to say, you said this, so what's your answer? My community meeting test is if I can't explain it and justify it, I better not do it. And if I'm not doing something I should do, and in a community meeting it would be pointed out, I do it. That's my test, my community meeting test. Thank you.
We're going to take one more question and we're going to let the candidates kind of mingle around. In the back, she's had her hand up.
I believe all of us in this room can agree that our constitutional rights are being taken away. And to quote John Adams, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. I have a twofold question. What will you do to bring our government back to being moral? Such as, what will you do to stop the murdering of our unborn citizens through abortion and through the guise of choice? And secondly, what will you do to get rid of the federal government departments and laws that are unconstitutional? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, we'll let you start.
Thank you. On the matter of pro-choice and abortion, I am pro-life, and I support all movements designed to pass laws that honor and protect life at every stage of life. That's number one. As far as unconstitutional laws, the solution to that is really to elect the right people. People who really love and respect the Constitution. You have to go through a vetting process to find out which candidates really respect the Constitution and which candidates have no respect for the Constitution. What we have now is an administration in Washington that is running havoc with the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, and 10th Amendment. All we can do is vigilance, eternal vigilance as citizens to select the candidates who we really believe put the Constitution front and center as the supreme law of the land, and who look at the Constitution as the blueprint for limited and effective government. I love the Constitution, and I stand by the Constitution. And I also adhere to the principles enumerated in the Declaration of Independence. And we need people to go to Washington who respect the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence as our founding documents. The only way we do that is through the crucible of competition to find out which candidates say what they mean and mean what they say.
We all love our country, and we all respect the Constitution, because we know we wouldn't have a country without this magnificent document. I happen to be what some call pro-choice. What my wife and I practice is maybe different than what the law would allow us to do. But I believe this is the quandary that Republicans have. They want social values, but then they want to instill their social values on others. That's the challenge we have. Tom DeLay was a great person on pro-life. He was the biggest spender in all of Washington. He was on the Appropriations Committee, and he could get away with being a big spender because some Republicans loved him because he was pro-life. I would submit to you, as important as those social issues are, the reason Republicans went off the track was they weren't willing to take on the hard issues of spending, for instance, because that would be unpopular, but they could be popular with Republican conservatives by just being pro-life. So what did we do when Tom DeLay was going to be indicted? And I said he needed to get off as our leader. I was one of only 3 people. Yeah, so much for being a Washington insider. And you know what his solution was? To take Terry Schiavo's case out of Florida. Remember, she was the person that was on instruments for years and years and years. And a Florida state and a Florida court said the plug could be pulled. So what did Republicans do? We took it out of the state court, so much for the 10th Amendment. We took it out of the state court, and then we gave it to the Supreme Court and asked them to be an activist Supreme Court, which is totally contrary to what we believe in. And the Supreme Court said, we're not touching this. But it was a great shield for all the Republicans who weren't carrying their weight and could just hide behind an issue, a social issue. It was so wrong. But they got away with it because, I guess, pro-life trumped everything else. So I'm just trying to illustrate there are conflicting issues where you both feel this way, and then you got to decide. I voted against taking Terry Schiavo out of the Florida court because I thought it belonged in state government. And I believed in state court, and I didn't think it belonged in a federal court. So we got to uphold the Constitution, but you know, sometimes we got issues. I could not yell fire in here and get and be free from breaking the law for a good reason. My freedom of speech did have some limit.
Your question is a question that deals with conservatism. It's a two-pronged question, but it's challenging us as to whether we are social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, and constitutionally conservatives, if you will. You cannot be part conservative, part liberal. You cannot be a mixture. You're either conservative or you're not. I'm a social conservative. I have 3 beautiful kids. I'm a Roman Catholic, and you know where I'm coming from when it comes to abortion. Personally, I don't believe in abortion. I believe in the sanctity of life. I believe that those beautiful words that we have in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, they come from God. And our government, it's there to protect them, to defend them. And I believe that we must defend the ones who need the most protection. And that is the unborn. That is, even when it comes to euthanasia and the elderly, we have to do that. However, 1974, Roe v. Wade decided otherwise. We had judges, unelected, appointed, and they decided that it's the law of the land. We have to respect it. We cannot break the law. The consequences of having so-called Republicans in the Senate, the United States Senate, gave us a court that decided the Roe v. Wade. That is how important the role of a United States Senator is going to be in years to come. Because we're going to deal with Supreme Court justices that are going to be appointed to the court, and we better make sure we get conservatives on that bench. Otherwise, the Constitution is flying out of the window. So that is the first part. Unfortunately, it's been decided, as I said, Roe v. Wade. It is what it is. We have to deal with it. The second part of your question, laws that are unconstitutional. Senators and congressmen pass those laws. Look at a bill when they propose it. It's got 12,000 pages, 30,000 pages. Look at Obamacare. We don't even know how many pages they have anymore. Who can read all those things that they have in 30,000 pages? Why? The question would be, how come they don't make it simple? 2 pages. Because they don't want you and I to understand it. Otherwise, they would make it 2 pages. They want to make sure that we, the ordinary folks, do not understand what's going on in Washington, D.C. And that is sad, because we can pass laws that are very simple, straightforward, and be constitutional. Because then we'll all understand it. We don't have to go up and down and challenge it and take it to court. And, you know, because most, I wouldn't say most, but many congressmen, congresswomen, senators are lawyers themselves. They know, if they want to know, when they pass a law as to whether that will be offensive of the Constitution. Sometimes they intentionally choose to ignore that. And I wouldn't do such a thing if I go to Washington, D.C. I'll make sure that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States would be the primary concerns that I would have prior to signing on any laws. Thank you.
We appreciate your willingness to listen to us. Thank you.
What we're going to do is we're going to take a 15-minute break, and we're going to let the candidates mingle around. I'd like to thank Chris Shays, Kai Westby, and Peter for coming here today. Thank you very much. Appreciate your help. I would also like to recognize Jeff Chase over here. He is the Democratic tracker. He's right over here with the film. If you'd like to ask him some questions, he's right here. Thank you, Jeff, for coming. Oh, how you doing? Nice to see you. What happened? Yeah, let
well, you know, I got so many, this is the third set today. Plus I got radio. No, I try not.
Hi, can I have your attention, please? Everybody, can I have your attention? Hello? Everybody, can we have your attention? Hello? We had one of our candidates who came in late for U.S. Senate. I would like to take a couple minutes and introduce him and give him a couple minutes to speak, and then we'll take some questions for him. At this time, I'd like to introduce Brian Hill. He is the candidate for the U.S. Senate. I'd like to give him a warm applause. Brian. Okay, quiet everybody. Can we have a moment, please?
All right, folks, come on and sit down. Oh, I gotta stand by the phone. You know I like to move around. Come on, folks. I apologize for being a little late. This is the third of 5 events that I have today. And I'll have to leave here and go to North Wyndham, so I'm not going to be able to stay around too long after I speak. But I wanted to make sure I came here to introduce myself to some of you and reacquaint myself with others. My name is Brian Cahill, middle initial K, and I'm also a candidate for the United States Senate for this year. I was born and raised in Windsor, Connecticut, which is the oldest town in the state of Connecticut, established in 1633. I went through public school system there. I went on to college at Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven, Connecticut. And then after I graduated from Southern, I went on to law school at Howard University in Washington, D.C. As you can see, a lot of attorneys running for office. In my third year of law school, I joined the military, and I became a Judge Advocate General Corps Attorney for the Navy. I did that for 6 straight years from 1998 to 2004. In 2004, I switched from the Navy to the Army and became an active duty Judge Advocate General Corps Attorney with the Army. Did that for 6 straight years and got off of active duty in the summer of 2010. I've been deployed around the world, as you might imagine. I've lived overseas. I lived in 8 or 9 different states. Practice a variety of fields of law, including being a prosecuting attorney, international law attorney, administrative law attorney. I've done federal contract law, federal fiscal law. I've been a base or installation attorney, staff judge advocate, which is like an in-house attorney for a base or a command. So I've got a pretty diverse legal background. How many veterans we have in here? Raise your hand if you're a veteran. Okay. All right, you guys know what a staff judge advocate is. Got off of active duty in 2010, started my own law firm in downtown Hartford. It's a general law practice where we help small businesses and families navigate this bureaucratic maze we have here in the state of Connecticut. So that is my educational and that is my professional background. Now let me tell you why I'm running for the United States Senate. I'm running for the Senate because this country is in serious trouble. And I don't think the average American understands the complexity of the situation that America finds itself in today. We are on the decline as a nation, as countries that don't have our best interests are on the rise. You couple that with the fiscal crisis that we're having, a $15 trillion debt, a $1.3 trillion on average annual deficit. You couple that with the fact that we have in our inner cities children in schools that look like prisons and prisons full of kids who should be in school. You couple that with an entitlement mentality that is settling into our citizens, especially our youth. And by that I mean there's too many people out there who expect something for nothing. There's too many people out there who expect others to do for them what they should be doing for themselves. There's too many people out there who have grown too comfortable living off the generosity and or sympathy of others. We've gone topsy-turvy in America, where we've gone from rewarding success to penalizing success. We've gotten so bad that success and independence is penalized and failure and dependency is rewarded in this country. And that's a travesty. This is not the country that I grew up in. I dedicated 12 years of my life fighting for this country because I believe it is the greatest country in the world. And I hate to see it turned into something that it's not. We're going down the wrong path, and that's why I'm running for the United States Senate. I passed out some flyers. I would rather answer questions than give a long monologue, so I'm not going to talk too much, but I do want to let you know why I'm running. People ask me, why are you running for the Senate in particular? Why don't you go run for some other position, a lower level position? And I tell them that I'm concerned about national security and foreign policy, and I'm also concerned about the appointments that we're making coming out of our Senate, especially these lower level court appointments, because we've been getting some wacky decisions from some of these lower level courts because we got people that are not qualified to be on the court, serving in the court. We also have people in these agency positions that are not qualified to be there, that are there. In the United States Senate, votes on those nominations. So that's why I'm running for the Senate in particular, in case any of you were wondering why. And something that's not being talked about at the national level is that whoever the next president is, regardless of who it is, will have one or more appointments to the Supreme Court. Now, you don't hear too many people talking about that. It is possible that if Obama is reelected, that this court can flip from 5-4 conservative to 5-4 liberal. And it'll be 10, 15 years before that's flipped back around. And you don't hear any of these candidates talking about that. That's a major, major issue. Make no mistakes about it, folks. Obviously, the #1 issue in this election is the economy. Obviously. But this election is more than the economy. This election is about this steady, progressive erosion of civil liberties and constitutional rights. This government, this administration wants to dictate how many calories in a Happy Meal. They want to dictate what you can do in the privacy of your own home. They want to dictate how you can raise your kids. They want to dictate what your children are taught in school. They want to dictate what procedures your doctor can offer you when you get sick. But more importantly, they want to dictate the winners and losers in society, and that's not right. I don't think that's right, and I think we need to change the people in Congress, and we need to change the president out of the White House so that we can get this country back on track. It's very simple. It's very simple. The solutions to our problems right here in Connecticut and the solutions to our problems in Washington are very simple. If you change the people, you change the policies. If you change the people, you change the policy. And so what we need to do as a party is do the things necessary to get our candidates elected. Because it doesn't matter what we say on the sidelines, it doesn't matter how principled we are, it doesn't matter what our theories are on the Constitution. If we're not in office, we cannot affect change. So we got to do the things necessary to affect change. Why do Republicans keep losing in the state of Connecticut? Why do Republicans keep losing in the state of Connecticut? I submit to you that that Democrats don't defeat Republicans. Republicans defeat we defeat ourselves. Why? Because we bash each other. We bash each other. You see what's happening at the national level. Our presidential candidates are bashing each other, and what are they doing? All they're doing is driving up Obama's poll numbers. That's all that they're doing. We cannot bash each other. All right? We have to stick together. There are less than 250,000 of us in this state. We are the minority. We cannot win unless we get votes from conservative Democrats and those independent voters, and we've been failing to get them. Why? Because we've been putting up the wrong type candidates, quite frankly. We've been putting up candidates from Lower Fairfield County. They dominate our primaries, they dominate our conventions, and then they end up losing the general election. And we got nothing to show for it. We got to do things differently, folks. We got to start going to those areas where we've been neglected. We got to start reaching out to the disparate interest groups in this state if we expect to win. We got to start doing better in our cities. We can no longer just get 10% of the vote and expect to win. The key to winning statewide election in the state of Connecticut is in those cities. It's just that simple. It's not rocket science. So we got to do better. We can't write off these cities. Why can't we write off the cities? We need the votes out of the cities. Why should we be going to the cities? For 3 main reasons. Number one, we can get votes in the cities, contrary to what you've been taught. We can get votes in the cities. There are people that will vote for you simply because you shake their hands. That's it. You don't need to do anything except shake their hands and ask them for their vote. There are people that will vote for you because they like your message. And believe it or not, the Republican conservative message resonates in the city. We've just been neglecting and taking that message out there. And 3, there are people that will vote for you, or they won't vote for you unless you give them something. I'm not suggesting that you give them anything, but the point is there's a way to get their votes too. And the Democrats do a very good job at giving voters things in the cities in return for their vote. So we can get votes that way. Second, by not going into the cities, let me say it again, by not going into the cities, what the Republican Party does is reinforce the negative image that the city dwellers already have of Republicans. That means we allow the Democrats to do our marketing for us. We allow all of the lies that they tell about Republicans to go unchecked and unchallenged. That means when they go into the senior centers and they tell seniors that you want to take away their Social Security and Medicare, all that stuff goes unchallenged. When they go into the black churches and tell them that you're all racist, all that stuff goes unchallenged. When they go into the immigrant communities and tell them that you want to kick them all out of the country, That goes unchallenged. We can no longer allow this to happen. We have to start taking our message there, and we have to start presenting the alternative to the Democrats. We cannot concede these cities to the Democrats. If anything, we have to try to neutralize the advantage that they have, but we can't do that unless we start the dialogue, and I plan to start that dialogue. Third major reason why we should be going into the cities. If there's going to be any election fraud, guess where it's going to take place? It's going to take place in one of these cities because it always has. So we cannot concede these cities. I don't plan on conceding these cities. We have to make sure we pick the candidate that has the right message, because the message is very important. But guess what? The messenger is just as important as the message. And we've been sending the wrong messenger. And that's why we keep losing. So I am the right candidate for this election, this general election. I'm the only candidate that can unite this party, all factions of this party. I'm the only candidate that understands what it takes to win, and I can execute. I'm a military man. I'm used to executing. So I ask for your support. Please go to my website and learn more about me. And at this time, I'm going to stop and answer any questions that you might have. All right, he had his hand up first.
I'd like to ask you your position on the Second Amendment.
I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. As a matter of fact, out of the candidates, I think I am the strongest supporter of the Second Amendment. And you can go ask some of the gun clubs around the state of Connecticut, because I spoke in that video. Yes, sir.
I met you at the Tea Party in Hartford on Monday for the first time,
Yes.
and it was a pleasure that you came out to say a few words there. And after that, I did a little research into your campaign and when you announced. And I noticed you said that in the article I read that you were a lifelong Republican, but you voted for Obama in 2008. And my question is, tell me why that vote does not disqualify you as running for a Republican in 2012.
Right. Thank you for the question. First of all, I have not been, I've been a lifelong Republican except for the last couple years of the W. Bush administration, where I switched to being independent. That's right on my, it should be on my website if it's not there. So, I've been a Republican in name, and I've been a Republican in faith for many years. Now, I didn't vote for Obama. I voted against McCain, and I'll tell you why. How many veterans in here? How many people that raise their hand that are veterans? How many of you have ever served on active duty during time of war? Okay, just a few of you. McCain lost the majority of the military vote in 2008. And he lost that because of his stance on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. McCain said that he was going to expand our role in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that was all he needed to say to lose the military vote. All right? Have you guys ever gone to a wounded warrior wing of a hospital and see 22-year-olds walking around in prosthetic legs and prosthetic arms? Have any of you ever traveled in a jump seat in the back of a military cargo plane coming from overseas and had this, and have that military cargo plane full of wounded soldiers coming from Iraq and Afghanistan, and have to sit 5 feet from them, stretched out in stretchers in the belly of a plane, and hear them moan and groan from the agony of having their body parts blown off? And the only thing you can do to comfort them is to go hold their hand and tell them that they're safe now and everything will be all right. Have any of you had that experience? Have any of you had to prosecute service members with post-traumatic stress syndrome who injured their family members, or abused their spouse, or abused their children? Not because they would normally do that, but because they were having a flashback from being in a combat zone in Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, I've had that unfortunate experience. I've also had the unfortunate experience of watching friends commit suicide because they don't want to be in Iraq and Afghanistan. So any candidate that says he was going to expand our operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, seeing up close and personal the toll that it was taking on our military members, I was not going to vote for. And I stand by that. So if you ask me why I voted against them, that's the reason why I voted against them. Our military is stretched thin. Our military is stretched thin. Right now, if Iran, China, Russia, and North Korea got together and attacked us, right now, we'd be hard-pressed to defend ourselves. We would be hard-pressed to defend ourselves. Our military is that stretched thin. We need to regroup. We need to get out some of the, we lowered our recruitment standards to keep up our recruiting efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan. We got a lot of gang members in the military right now. We got a lot of people who are not physically, mentally, or physically qualified to be there. We need to get rid of these people to make sure that we keep up our standards and have the strongest military in the world. And so, again, that's one of the major reasons why I'm running is national security and foreign policy. And I want to make sure that we have the strongest military in the world, because you can't negotiate from a position of weakness. You have to negotiate from a position of strength. And that's why we need to have the strongest military in the world. And we have a president that's trying to gut the military. And that will not happen on my watch if I have anything to do with it.
Thank you very much, Brian. We appreciate it. We'll move along with our congressional candidates. And once again, we'd like to thank all the Senate candidates for coming out and doing a great job here. So we'll move right along.